So I think about a year ago, my cousin's younger sister got admitted to this particular hospital for some medical reasons. I can't exactly remember what it was, but she was there for quite some time. So in the middle of the night, while my cousin was babysitting his sister because trusted family members are allowed to be in the room overnight to watch over patients, he was sitting on the chair beside the bed, half asleep, when a nurse comes in to check, injecting the IV and things, and just usual nurse stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary, he thought, but while he was half awake, looking at the ground, he was surprised to see that this nurse was barefoot and silently judged her on how unhygienic this was, but he kept his thoughts to himself. He immediately fell back asleep, thinking nothing of the situation. About a couple of weeks after, when his sister had finally been discharged, he was chatting to an old schoolmate of his, who was also a nurse working at the hospital, and casually slipped in to the conversation about how weird it was to see a nurse doing that. She stares at him in shock because apparently, according to the people who have worked there have been multiple incidents of this happening over the years and no one in the hospital does that at all. A few members of staff have also encountered this nurse at night but do not recognise her and usually thought nothing of it until afterwards when they mention it to other members of staff. So yeah, creepy stuff. Although it could be logically explained in a number of ways, still a bit weird to think that there's a possibility she snuck into the hospital to do God knows what for whatever reason. I'm just glad that his sister got out okay. I first want to preface this post by saying that I am someone who does suffer from an overactive imagination. I tend to see into things that are just not there, or being sensitive to certain noises. I tend to think that this is due to me having Asperger's, and move on. But this was entirely different. I live on the top floor of an apartment that I rent from my family where I live by myself. It's nice to receive the independence that I yearned for, and it helped me come out of my shell by getting back into exercise and cooking and much more, and genuinely just going about my day with a wider and happier stride. I've always loved horror as well as tabletop games, although I am a self-professed coward and tend to make a good impression with people I meet, thanks to years of growing, therapy, and helping me find myself. I moved into this apartment in the winter of 2017, and when moving, I noticed that the apartment opposite me was empty. I spoke to my parents, who said they never saw who used to live there, but whoever it was soon moved out and were never seen again, only to be visited by bailiffs, which have since stopped. The place made me feel uncomfortable already, as I had to face away from that door to unlock mine. The lock on my door was broken for a while, meaning I had to be very specific with how I unlocked it or the key would just end up getting jammed. I would always feel eyes burning at the back of my neck, looking behind me to only see the same white door, my eyes leading up to the peephole. I remember once staring at that peephole for a whole 5 minutes, looking for any subtle change in the light. I'm quite a big guy at around 250 pounds at 6'1", but there was a feeling that made me feel like I was 6 years old again. Each time I passed that door to number 13, I swear I could hear noises coming from within. Footsteps, quiet arguing, and even the door jiggling. Each time something like that happened, I felt my soul dying just a little bit more. I soon caught myself unlocking my door and entering my safe haven to get lost in the books, video games, and other stuff. At my job, I tend to work later sometimes if I need to speak to a team in America, or if I just cannot face waking up early. I work for a large firm as an analyst, although I wouldn't want to get into too much detail regarding that, and since it was bang in the middle of winter, it would tend to get dark around 4:30 to 5 p.m. I would walk down the public driveway and look up to my apartment, but only to notice that the blinds next door were shut. I don't remember if they were always shut, as I never focused on it, but it fell off, as if you were looking at a puzzle only to notice in the centre a piece was missing. I climbed the stairs leading up to my door, lost in my thoughts because I was having a particularly bad time at work during then, staring at the steps in front of me before I found myself on that same landing, but this time something felt off. I could smell something that was off. I immediately thought that it was just rubbish from the downstairs that hadn't been collected yet. But there was something different. The air felt heavier, almost colder, as I approached the door. There was a smell of rotting meat that I hadn't noticed before. I knelt down by the door, letting my backpack slide to the floor as I leaned against the door. It was from there. It was definitely from their door. There was the smell. My mind raced as I could not immediately pin what on earth was causing it. I laid on my front and tried to look under the gap at the door, only to immediately start gagging, almost vomiting, as I keeled backwards. I gripped the carpet, rolling away, and knocked over a couple of things as I clenched my chest. That was the smell of death. Like, have you ever smelt a dead animal? Like a fox on the side of the path that is rotting and you can see its rib cage slightly poking out as maggots writhe and squirm in the decaying flesh? Yeah, anyway, it was that smell. I stared through the gap, only to be met by pitch black. I could have sworn that I saw something pushed to the side, but I didn't want to stay there any longer. I darted up, retreated back inside, called my dad and told him all about it. It wasn't too long after that, maybe a day or two, when I heard someone entering the building, and it was the building manager, and he'd gone into the property, and that was it. Nothing else was said about it. No one could tell me what had happened, or they didn't want to. I thought I saw a look in my dad's eyes when I questioned him, and all it beckoned me to do was shut up and accept that sometimes answers just don't give you closure. I never knew what happened behind that door, nor would I ever wish to know. I don't know if my mind is playing tricks on me when I get a nasty shiver race down my spine whenever I look at the painted oak door, treating whatever was there with a gentle facade, much like how some wear a mask to hide what is behind their own eyes. I sometimes swear I could still smell it. Whatever it was, I sometimes think that someone was dead, but I don't think I'll ever know, or want to know. Whoever you were, whatever that was, let's not meet. This happened when I was about 13 years old. One weekend, my parents went out of town for work, so I was staying with my friend who lived across the street. Every morning, I would wake up and go let the dogs out, feed them, and clean the litter box. Then my friend and I would go play for the rest of the day, sporadically checking on the house. One morning, my friend and I woke up very early, still dark out, and look across the street at my house. Our electric garage door kept opening and closing all by itself, constantly, and one of my dogs runs out of the garage. I ran out and grabbed the dog. Then we watched the house for about 5 minutes before we decided to walk across the street to check on it, thinking it was a glitch. We walk into the garage where I push the button and it stops. Now, to explain my house, you walk into an entryway and then the house is split level. You can go upstairs or down. We walk up, flipping on the lights and looking around, and there is nothing. Then we begin to walk downstairs. As I flip on the stair light, which has a dimmer on it, we see a shadow on the wall downstairs quickly move away from the bottom of the staircase towards the other side of the basement. My friend and I freak out, run out the back door to my friend's house, where we wake her parents, who then call the cops. They come and search the house. Nothing inside, however, they do find footprints in the snow all over the back deck, which wasn't shoveled, and the back door unlocked. Nothing was missing as far as we could tell, so I cannot imagine what he wanted. I didn't step foot into that house again until my parents came home, and even then I basically had to be bribed. Not to mention that my room was down in the basement. I slept in my parents' room for 2 weeks after that, a teenager sleeping on the floor in their parents' room. So, to the man who I assume was in my house, let's not meet. It all happened to my father one stormy night, in Glenwood, Colorado. It was the 80s. My father was an electrical engineer who was just returning home from the job site. He worked long hours, and it wasn't uncommon for him to be heading home around midnight to the small cabin he shared with a friend, tucked back in the canyon walls. It was pouring rain. Lightning flashed, only to illuminate the murky puddle patches of washed-out terrain. As my father rounded the corner upon the dirt road, he passed a large willow tree. As his headlights crossed its base, he noticed someone was crouched underneath it, and it was a woman, who seemed to be in her late 20s, with a long, blonde hair, quite tangled. She had on fairly casual clothes and carried a somewhat large bundle in her arms, wrapped in cloth. My father, being the gentleman that he was, decided to pull over and offered her to take shelter from the storm in his cabin that was just up the road. She smiled and thanked him as she got into the vehicle. She explained that she had been on a hike through the canyon that day when the storm had hit and had been caught off guard by the rain. My dad smiled and pointed out that she wasn't exactly wearing the best clothes or shoes to go on a hike. She laughed and said that she had left her place on a whim, unprepared. He asked if she needed him to dry anything at his place, pointing to the bundle she held tightly under her arm. Her voice suddenly got very stern and stated, "No." When my father asked her where she lived around here, things started to get strange. She started telling my dad that she had no family or friends in the area and was quite vague when asked details of where she lived. All she responded with was that it was too late to drive to tonight in this kind of weather. At this point, my dad said he felt that she was a bit off, but chalked it up to her exhaustion from hiking and standing out in the storm for several hours. As they entered the cabin, my dad remembered that his roommate had left that morning to take a trip out of town and wouldn't be back for several days. My dad would have offered her his friend's room, but didn't feel comfortable doing so without her permission. Remember, this was the 80s, so pocket cell phones weren't on everyone yet. My dad told her that she was welcome to sleep on the couch and dry off as he handed her several towels. She took them from him with her right hand, but still never let go of that bundle she hugged under her left arm. My dad at this point realised that she had never given him her name, so he introduced himself. "Nice to meet you," she replied. "My name is Mary Lou." My father started to feel a bit more comfortable and turned on the television for her and handed over the remote. She scanned through the channels, finally deciding on a gangster flick. The scene involved a bunch of mobsters getting shot to pieces. Mary found this to be quite amusing and started to laugh in a high-pitched, crackling tone. My dad started to get a bit creeped out by this. She was enjoying it a little bit too much, he said. Then my dad asked her about her life, and things took a turn for the worst. When asked if she was in a relationship, she pointed down at her belt buckle and told my dad the story of her breakup. She claimed her last boyfriend wanted to be domineering over her, and to this she responded by bludgeoning him half to death in his gravel driveway with her belt buckle, the same one that she was wearing. He kept saying, "Stop, please stop," and begging, but I wouldn't show him mercy, she said, with a note of pride in her voice. My dad asked if he had abused her, or if she had reacted in self-defense, and she merely scoffed and said, "No, otherwise he would have been dead." My father's unease grew as the conversations progressed. She told him about her mother dying on the operating table and how the surgeon who had been working on her walked out covered in blood and said that she would be fine. How was she supposed to be okay with all of her guts in the trash can? She spewed, laughing as she glanced back at the TV screen, littered with dishevelled, bullet-riddled corpses. I love the sight of blood. It excites me. Turns me on, you know. Death. Draining them to death. At this point, my dad was officially done. He was bigger and stronger than she was. He was quite streetwise and had seen plenty of horrors himself, but the way she spoke with a violent confidence combined with her sure grip upon the bundle which lay under her arm sent chills down his spine, and he needed a plan. Finally, an idea popped into my father's head. I have a friend who is a priest in town, and he has access to several shelters funded by the church. You would be a lot more comfortable there instead of on our couch. They can feed you too, and arrange a ride for you to get home in the morning. I can call him right now. He's only a few miles away from here, he stated reassuringly. Mary Lou's tone brightened to match his. That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much. My father smiled, hiding his relief. Of course, it's the least I could do for you. As my dad walked over to the phone and began to dial the second number, Mary Lou erupted in a low, guttural growl. I hate priests. I hate priests. She didn't yell it. She didn't scream it. She said it with a tired hatred, a clear, direct, audible disdain from the bottom of her heart with an unflinching resolve. And my dad had had enough. This wasn't a game to play anymore. This was beyond a stranger with odd tendencies. A darkness with coiled cruelty had crossed the threshold of his door. You need to leave, and you need to leave now, my dad said, pointing to the front of the cabin. There's the door. I can't have you in here and feel comfortable. I'm sorry, but the storm has stopped, and I hate to have you walk in the dark, but that's just the way this has to go. Please leave. Mary Lou gazed upon him, expressionless, and finally just shrugged. My father walked her out, standing close to her in the event that the small bundle concealed some type of weapon. He wasn't taking any further chances. She smiled at him as she slowly walked out onto the front porch. Goodbye for now. See you when I see you, she said calmly. With that, she walked down the long dirt road with a single streetlight upon its path. She looked back one last time before crossing the light and disappearing, enveloped by the darkness with no trace of her to be seen. My dad called the police the next day, concerned that she may be hiding on his premises somewhere, after speaking to his girlfriend, now my mum, about it, and being convinced by her that she was going to cut the window screen when he was gone and hide in the house and then kill him. They found nothing, but said that the area attracted a lot of nomads and transients. My father then made the mistake of telling his engineer buddies at work, which resulted in them bidding him farewell at the end of each shift in the form of asking that he say hi to Mary Lou for them. My dad never saw her again. He still questions what could have been in that bundle that she adamantly protected. He'll never know. I am 22 years old and I live in Toronto, Canada, in a nice suburban area. When I was around 18 years old, I had a house party at the same house that I am still living in now. My parents went to our cottage to spend the weekend, and it was a beautiful summer evening. There were around 25, maybe more people at this party. We were all drinking and being obnoxious teenagers as expected. At around 12 a.m, the police showed up. I'm sure it had a lot to do with the fact that me and my ex were in the driveway having a screaming war. Luckily, the officers didn't ask anything about alcohol or anything like that. Just told everyone who was not spending the night to leave, and if they come back there would be a problem. After the cops and the majority of the guests finally left, I told everyone to keep the party inside because I didn't want it too loud outside. I decided I needed some fresh air and some time to myself after the events of the night. I went out into my backyard and sat on the patio chair, leaning my head against a wooden fence behind me, and then I began to doze off. While I was snoozing, my two friends thought it would be a good idea to sneak up on me and scare the crap out of me. So they did, and I let out a huge scream. I'm not sure how long I had been sleeping for, it couldn't have been that long. About 20 seconds after my scream, we heard another scream come from somewhere else. It was almost like a delayed echo. It was the scream of a female for sure, and it sounded like it was coming from down the street. We started walking towards that part of the backyard that had a chain link fence so that we could see down the road and down my street. It was very dark, probably about 1:30 now, and the street was very dimly lit with street lights. I was just about to say it must have been someone walking by and they wanted to be funny or something, when one of my friends pointed out a girl standing about 20 feet away at the end of someone's driveway, just staring at us. She was wearing a short black dress, had long dark hair, and her skin was really pale. It almost seemed to glow in the dark. I suggested that it looked a lot like our friend Laura, who the last time I saw was extremely intoxicated. I thought maybe she'd got out of the house and was trying to mess around with us. One of my friends volunteered to go inside and look for Laura, while me and my other friend stayed in the backyard trying to figure out who this girl was. I screamed again to see if it would get the same response, and I did. She screamed back almost immediately. I then called out, "Laura?" And she responded with, "Yeah." My friend and I decided that we needed to approach her and try and get her back into the house safely before the cops came back and we all got into serious trouble. We got about halfway to this girl and she still stood there like she was made from stone. She didn't move. She didn't even make a noise, just stood there, staring at us. I began to think to myself, this can't be Laura, because if it was, she wouldn't just be standing there like she was. We still couldn't make out the face, and then the next thing I know, I hear my friend who went inside calling out for us. "Laura is inside, passed out." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I froze. All of a sudden, this mystery girl starts cackling so loud that my friend and I both jumped, and I mean, she was laughing so loud, it was unbelievable. She then turned around and ran up the driveway towards the back of the house, continuing with this crazy, scary laughing. When she was finally out of sight, I could still hear her laughing, like she was just 10 feet away from us still. We turned around and started power walking back to the house, when we were suddenly startled with this loud banging sound that almost sounded like the metal garbage cans smashing together. This girl really creeped me out, so I went inside, locked all the windows and doors, and hid under my covers. To this day, I still have no idea who she was. What young girl in their right mind would just stand there by herself when two strangers are approaching her? One of the strangers being 6'2" and 210 pounds. She was either really brave or just wanted to have some fun with us. My friends had suggested that maybe this girl was drunk or on some serious drugs, or she was something else, and that just creeps me right out to think about. The weirdest event about this story is that the next day I saw the man who lives at that house where the girl was standing, and I asked him if he heard or saw anything out of the ordinary between 1 and 2 a.m, and he said he heard nothing. It seems almost impossible that she was so close to his house and was so loud, but he didn't hear anything. What do you guys think?